to move a lawnmower. Anyway, so I have Wayne McRoy, author of 2 books that you can find on Amazon. Your first, Alchemical Tech Revolution, Fulfilling Ancient Esoteric Agendas Through the Use of High Technology. And the latest one, the most recent one, The Autism Epidemic, Transhumanism's Dirty Little Secret. Okay, so what we'll do is I'll start off by giving the people information. So if they're starting to listen to it, they can go to your Facebook page or whatever social media that you have to kind of get familiar with you on that end while listening to our conversation.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
I'm getting a weird echo here. Hold on 1 second. Let me see if I can remedy that.
Okay. Testing. All right. As with Alana Freeland last week, we had a crazy sound like that, and let me see if I can give it a little back.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, it sounds clear.
Okay, sorry about that.
No worries, because last week I had a conversation with Alana Freeland. Are you familiar with her?
Yeah, I know Alana.
Okay, all right. So I had a conversation with her, and then we're talking, and everything sounded very clear. And then she started mentioning that there was some, weird sounds and stuff that she was hearing that that were obviously was affecting her side of it. I couldn't hear it, but then when I played it back, it sounded exactly like that, like this, like really like nasty sound. Anyway, guess it's Skype. Technology. Yeah. So we'll be talking, obviously be talking more about that. So go ahead and let everybody know where they can find your information, and then we can.
Okay.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Basically, the place where I post most things is on my Facebook page, which is called Files from the Conspiratorium. I can be reached there. I can also be reached at alchemicaltechrevolution@gmail.com if anybody wants to contact me directly. I also have a YouTube channel that I've kind of backed away from lately because YouTube's become such an avenue for censorship that I haven't really bothered with it much lately. But if people want to check it out, there's still some pretty good videos and stuff posted on there, and that one's called Alchemical Tech Revolution, and that's on YouTube. So if anybody wants to check out those start points, also my books are available on Amazon and should be available through any other fine book retailer at this point.
Okay, very good. So your email address, your Gmail address is the Alchemical Tech Revolution, or is it Alchemical Tech Revolution?
Just Alchemical Tech Revolution at gmail.com. No the.
Okay, terrific. All right, so again, I had a conversation with Alana Freeland last week after seeing her at a conference in New Mexico. They recorded it online with it was her and Clifford Carnicom. A guy that I've been familiar with for quite some time, and they had some pretty interesting information. I don't know. I was wondering if you were aware of that conference that took place down there.
I'm aware of it. I didn't get a chance to check out any of the interviews or anything on it yet. But Clifford Carnicom, he's another great guy. He's very knowledgeable. One of the early pioneers in researching Morgellons. Mm-hmm. So, these are two very bright people. I can't speak highly enough of Ilana. She does a lot of great work too.
Yeah, she was just a really sweet, knowledgeable woman, and she spoke of Clifford's ethics, and she thinks that he's one of the most ethical people that she's ever met, and he was really kind of like pleading at one point in his dissertation for funding and legal representation, because 20 years now he's done research on geoengineering, and and of course that's going to tie into, I believe, on some level with what what you've been writing about, and I heard you on 777, and that was where I was just like, I just feel as though I need to reach out to as many people as I can to expand. To expand upon it, get it out there in the ether, get people
right, absolutely,
and to bring people such as yourself into, so that I can propagate your information, because all the conversations, and I want to say you were on with Jason and Crow like maybe 2 or 3 times, so. I actually kind of forget exactly how I come across certain podcasts, but then I find them and I'm like, wow, these guys are really good. And then, I heard, you and you and them kind of communicating about your information and your knowledge and your books. And I was figuring, I might as well reach out and see if I can touch base. Cause it's, again, it's really about networking and, the world. The power, the power elite, they network in ways we should also, and we have been. We should try to keep doing that and expand upon that. So, I welcome you to Cold Reality Radio here. This is obviously on the UCY.TV broadcasting network. Okay, so now when there's 2 ways that I'm interested in people's, beginnings and how they, and how this all kind of started for them. And, and then moving forward, or I've heard people kind of start with where they are now and then kind of reverse engineer their experience and how they, kind of like they do in movies, they'll start you at the beginning and then take you to the end, or they'll start you at the end and then, so however you want to kind of break it down, just kind of let the listeners out there know, however you feel comfortable with, kind of laying it out there.
Okay. We can start back, I guess early on. Growing up, I was always had a lot of different paranormal type experiences and things as a kid growing up. And I was always kind of interested in these fringe type topics. So, from there, when I got older, I kind of backed away from all that. And, I got married and had kids, became a born again Christian. I was just living a normal life, just regular guy doing my day-to-day thing, go to work every day, that kind of thing. And I started noticing some things going on in society that were a little bit disturbing. And it came to a head for me back in the fall of 2006 when I was driving home from my mother's house with my oldest son in the car with me. And he was probably about 12, 13 years old at the time. So he was with me, and he witnessed this too. We saw a UFO pass overhead, and it was this strange-looking craft. It was definitely a solid metallic craft. It was square-shaped. It had a white light on each corner, and one big red light in the center, and it passed slowly overhead. I actually pulled the car over to the side of the road, and I had a car with a power moonroof at the time. So we pulled over to the side of the road, going up over the mountain there, and opened the moonroof and watched it pass overhead. And it was only probably about maybe 30 yards above the treetops, and it was moving very slow. And we both saw this, and my jaw dropped. So that renewed my interest in the UFO subject. So I went hunting around, again, researching the whole UFO topic. And the branches that took me down were really kind of intriguing and surprising, because anybody who does any type of serious research into these things learns that a lot of these different, say, quote-unquote, conspiracy-type topics, they kind of all tie together in these really unique ways. Mm-hmm. So that led me down a bunch of different rabbit holes in my research. And then after I started doing that, when my other son, my second son, was born in 2008, he wound up having a serious reaction to a DTaP vaccine. And later developed autism. So that kind of sent me searching down a different branch of topics, and lo and behold, it all tied together with all the other subjects I was researching. Yeah. And I found all kinds of just interesting and disturbing things. So at the behest of my wife, who was nagging me for a long time, she said, "Why don't you write a book about this stuff?" So that's how I got involved in writing books. I had never planned becoming an author or a researcher of any type, or definitely not a public speaker. But this is kind of the path that God led me down. So this is where I'm going, and this is where I'm heading, and I'm just out here trying to sound the alarm, because at the top of it all, there's an overarching agenda. And if you want to call it a conspiracy at play, the overarching conspiracy or agenda at play is the transhumanist movement. And this underlies everything going on in our society right now. So I'm out there trying to sound the alarm for people so they understand this is coming at us like a freight train, and we need to, pump the brakes and slow it down here, because there's an evil agenda behind it right now. And just like anything else, technology is a tool, and it could be used for good or bad. But right now, the people controlling it are using it for bad purposes. So I'm just out there sounding the alarm.
Because we know that they've used technology for bad in other theaters around the world, for sure.
Absolutely.
And so for everyone listening out there who has ever had a situation where, especially with a child, okay? Two people get married, they have a child, okay? And they have a health scare. And you happen to notice that this happened after this DTaP injection. And the thing is that most people do not even think about these things, and to their own detriment. But at the same time, when they have a child and they go through like a normal process and they don't see any types of problem or adverse reaction to a sick child, because, hey, you just brought this child into the world and you're focused on this child. So you see everything. You see everything that's good, and you see things that are not normal, and then, you react to it. Yours was, I want to imagine it was most likely, let me look at this online. Did you ever hear anything about people that were, like they're labeling people today like anti-vaxxers or anything like that? Was there something in your mind? Like, did you ever? And I think it goes back to this, and I don't know whether I heard you say it or someone else say it. Do you want authority? Do you want truth to be your authority, or do you want authority to be your truth? Someone said that. I don't know whether, and I might have heard it on one of Crow's, podcast. But yeah, do you want truth to be your authority or authority to be your truth? And so when this happened, did you ever think about the vaccine being what caused what was happening, or what was the? And we will spend like a certain amount of time in this, and we'll move on. But I think the point that I want to make here is that most people, if they have a child that doesn't get a reaction, then they think, hey, everything's good. And they become part of this knowledge, or this knowledge base that is like, hey, I had 3 kids and we never had any kind of problem. But the parents that do, and then you can look at Jenny McCarthy as a celebrity who went through this and started to. She started researching this. She connected with Andrew Wakefield, another one of these doctors who has been ostracized because of his take on vaccines and different things like that. So, were you aware of any of this, of these potential risks of vaccines, or did you just kind of go and be like, hey, just kind of do whatever you need to do medically for my newborn?
Well, basically at the time, I was really pretty ignorant of the whole vaccine thing. Okay. I had heard Jenny McCarthy speaking about it and stuff like that, and I thought, well, that's not anything to pay attention to, because that's just a celebrity out there just trying to, hog up more screen time or whatever. Mm-hmm. I didn't think much about it, but when he had the shot later that day, that's when he got deathly ill. Mm-hmm. So it happened at the same time, right after the shot. So we kind of thought maybe something was going on with that, but I hadn't really put 2 and 2 together until it was probably about a week or 2 later. My wife was talking to a friend of ours who's his nurse, and we had told her in conversation what had happened. So she mentioned that that's a sign of autism, that she'd seen it before. Mm-hmm. Something like that happened, what had happened to my son. Mm-hmm. So after that, once we started noticing he lost his ability to make eye contact, and he started drooling excessively. Those were the first 2 symptoms that we noticed, almost, immediately after this whole incident took place. He started drooling excessively right up until the age of 3 or 4. He drooled excessively. We have old family portraits that were taken where you could just see the drool stain in his shirt because he drooled so excessively, and you could see his chin looked shiny from the drool.
And what age was he when he got the?
He was 3 months old when he got the DTaP shot.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And he was a perfectly healthy, happy, normal, on-target baby up until that point.
Same dog, yeah.
So, and then after that, he developed what was later diagnosed as extreme ADHD. That was the first thing we had noticed, as far as some of the other symptoms. He was climbing out of his crib at 9 months old, and he was very hyperactive, and that was the first thing that was probably the most difficult thing to deal with. Right. He's doing very well today. We've been through the mill with this whole autism thing. Right. So we've had some experience with it.
Sure.
So I come from a pretty informed place when I'm writing about this stuff. And I also have a 7-year-old daughter who's also on the autism spectrum. Both of my children are on the higher functioning end of the autism spectrum. Okay. But it really doesn't make it any less challenging. But exactly. This was my thought going into it. I never really believed the whole vaccine connection thing until it happened to us. And then once I got researching down that road, mm-hmm. I found out all the horrible things they put in the vaccines. How the testing is done and how the numbers are skewed.
Right.
It's terrible. It's terrible. It's bad, and there's definitely a different agenda behind it. They could care less about public health.
Oh, my God.
Make no mistake about it.
Yeah, right. So,
these people, they could care no less about public health. That's not what it's about at all.
Not at all. You are absolutely correct, and I'm glad that that you put it and described your experience in that way, because I want people to hear. I want people to understand something, okay? And not only is there aluminum and mercury and a lot of these other, DNA, animal DNA, things that have never should cross the barrier. Things in these vaccines should have never crossed the animal-human barrier, okay? And I believe, and I'm not super Bible versed, but somewhere in there, and one of my good, online friends, a guy by the name of Clint Richardson. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Clint.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So yeah, Clint, when I believe that everything kind of happens for a reason, and in my path and my journey through this whole thing, that of course people call me, paranoid, delusional, when I speak of these things, because they can't, because of their inabilities, their problem. I'm a sane guy like you in an insane world. And so, but, they have to say the things that they have to say because they don't know any better. Okay. So not only is there aluminum, mercury, and a lot of these other nasty things in these vaccines, but there's also, infectious proteins. Okay.
That's a nice way of putting it. Let's not mince words. It's aborted fetuses.
Right, aborted fetuses. But and I think it's like a PRCC or something. And Clint pointed this out. Now, Clint did a lot of incredible research on this. He has one vaccine documentary out there, and I spoke to him probably I want to say about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, and he's working on a 6-hour documentary to follow up from his original one. And so part of the breakdown, and he connected with a man by the name of Patrick Jordan, who's an author and has written about vaccines. He's got a website called vaccinefraud.com. He wrote a book, one of his most recent books, called Prion Agenda. And these infectious proteins get injected and lie dormant in the body. So these are the things, like when your child had an instant reaction, boom, okay? The other reactions sometimes can take years to become, and then you wouldn't even know, because when according to Clint and Patrick, these prions activate, and then what they do is, because they're misfolded proteins, they go and they touch normal proteins and they mutate those. And so this prion, they call prion disease, what is going on with a lot of these neurodegenerative diseases. They give all of these neurodegenerative diseases different names, but according to these two incredible minds, people that I've been blessed to, it's been nightmarish just knowing it, but I'd rather know it than not know it. But it's, blessed to have been, put in contact in on my journey. They say that these prions are what, these infectious proteins are what are destroying the immune system to a large extent, and at the same time, they're causing all of these Parkinson's, all these neurological spectrum disorders, just like they give the autistic or autism spectrum disorders. So they can, instead of, giving it a name, they can say, well, it's in that spectrum of things. And so for anyone that's going to listen to this, and I'm going to make sure that this gets to a couple people that really kind of saw me as being someone who did not really, who oh, you worry too much about why do you think about things like this? Why is this? You know, I mean, all these questions that they ask, because at the core, if they had to take these things on and they knew the reality of these things, they would cry themselves to sleep every night. And
Absolutely.
This is the fucking, and pardon my language, but this is the real shit that men, so-called men in our society that are supposed to protect their children and are supposed to protect their families are not doing that. They're not doing it. And they've been fooled. They've been deceived. I get it, because people get to a point of complacency. And so having said that, these vaccines and the push for this, for what we're seeing, and I'll have you at some point just kind of like, this measles, everybody's got to get vaccinated and all this other stuff. There's a major push for it, and it's got connections to your research as well. So you had this experience with the unidentified object that flew, and obviously this was at night, because largely these things do happen at night.
Right.
Some of them happen during the day, and then people get them on film, and they're in and of themselves, they're pretty fantastic. You know, if they're real, they look real, could be doctored or whatever. But you saw this. So what was after that? I mean, this just profoundly changed your take on the world. Or
after I had the UFO experience, like I said, I started going down the rabbit hole of the UFO thing, and it branched out into a lot of different places. And I like to tell people I accidentally became an expert in occult philosophy because of this. And it's strange, but all these different branches of these conspiracy type subjects, they all tie together at the top. And like I said, the undercurrent behind it all is the transhumanist movement. So that's kind of where it started. But then after this happened with my son, I really kicked into high gear with this stuff. I spent like literally hours upon hours. I must have literally tens of thousands of hours into research into a lot of these different topics at this point. So it's kind of consumed my life in a way. And a lot of synergistic things and synchronistic things have happened in my life now since I started going down this path. I should say since God started leading me down this path. Because
there's a reason for everything.
I had no intention of ever doing anything like this.
Right.
In fact, I had a hard time coming to terms with it because I was a born-again Christian. My wife and I regularly attended a Pentecostal church. So, it's been one of the dogmas in any Christian religion is that a lot of this stuff is of the devil. It's evil. Stay away from it. Don't look at it. But I came to the realization that in order to understand your enemy, you have to study them and know what their tactics are. You can't possibly win a fight against somebody if you don't know what their tactics are.
Exactly.
So after coming to this conclusion and being led in this direction, I came to realize this is the path that God wants me to go down. And as hard of a time as I had coming to grips with this, because, I'd been kind of, let's say, brainwashed a little with the dogmatic thought of some of the mainline Christian churches and stuff like that. Because at that point I had been a practicing Christian for over 10 years easily. So, I'd done the whole, theology studies and went down the whole eschatology studies and things like that. I've done a lot of research into, at that point, different facets of the Christian religion. Especially, I was always fascinated by the whole end times prophecy stuff and eschatology. And it's amazing how that all ties into this stuff too. And that's a topic for another show entirely. But
right.
Man, there's just so much there. But I realized this was the calling that God had put on my life. So once I became comfortable with that, all sorts of synchronicities started opening up in my life. In fact, one of the major synchronicities that happened is I got back in touch with a childhood friend who I'd lost touch with for 25 years. And that would be Jason Lindgren from Crow 777 Radio.
Very good.
We grew up together. We were best friends as kids. We lost touch after high school, and I hadn't heard from him. And a mutual friend on Facebook had posted something. I forget exactly what it was, but that Jason had posted, and he was talking about social engineering. Mm-hmm. And, this mutual friend had no clue what he was talking about, but I chimed in, and we kind of got back in touch that way. Mm-hmm. And it was at this time I was working on my first book. I was about halfway through my first book, mm-hmm. and Jason had no idea I knew anything of this sort. I had no idea he was doing what he's doing, mm-hmm. and we got back in touch, and, from there, I kind of had my foot in the door, per se, as a way to actually get this stuff out there publicly. That didn't exist before. Sure. Like, I had no idea. I just started writing my first book out of just sheer faith. I had no idea how I was going to market it, how I was going to publish it, anything of the sort.
Right. And I mean, having listened to Jason and Crow, these guys, I mean, they are so knowledgeable. They bring so much to the table, from alchemy, spagyrics, plant alchemy, which I found like completely. I just got totally immersed in that, and I think I'm gonna start reaching out in those directions to get more information and possibly even use some of those products. The sky clock, astrology, things like that. The equinox is not actually syncing up, and so many other things that again for like another program. But these guys are really, really intelligent guys, and Jason sounds he sounds so young in his voice. But something tells me like Crow was making reference to, things that he experienced as a young man. I'm like, he sounds like a young guy, but he's he's most likely probably in his 50s and maybe close to 60, which is kind of. But it was good to hear them and be exposed to them in this, hearing your information, and now we're talking. So, and at some point. If you want, if you're up for it, when Clint gets done his documentary, we can maybe do like a recording, a program as well on that, just to kind of share information and for him to get some of his newer information and have it sync up and with what you've been studying. Okay, so. I've never had any, I've never seen an unidentified flying object. I've seen so many different things. I've listened to guys like John Lear, if you're familiar with John Lear.
Oh yeah.
On some of his interviews, people interviewing him about Bob Lazar. And strangely enough, like Bob Lazar now is there's a Netflix show, and now he's been on Joe Rogan, so he's kind of moving things in a specific direction. Now I don't know what to think of that, so I always kind of beings in my early days when I started doing podcasting in late 2011. And I was on Oracle Broadcasting, and then after Oracle got shut down, most likely because a large sum of money was offered, and it may have came from the InfoWars camp because they were all came out of the same area. The guy who was the program director over at Oracle, he lived in right outside of Austin. Good guy, still does a really, really great podcast, a really great show, and he's got a website called blacklistednews.com. Doug Owen is his name. So I got my start there, and then of course I was barking up trees and going in directions that kind of weren't pushing me in any particular direction. I became kind of stagnant, listening to specific portals of information that were giving you a certain amount of information, but not really getting to the crux of things. And then, of course, after that, fell apart. UCY, I was, someone over at UCY reached out to me who had actually was, to my surprise, was actually, streaming my Sunday morning program to the network, the program manager over there. And they were like, oh, I hope you're not upset. I was like, no, I was just surprised anybody was interested in what I had to say. And I think going back in that time, but everybody has to start in their embryonic stages of understanding the way the world really operates and how the entire world is a corporation. The entire world is a corporation. And then once you see that the entire world is the Crown Corporation, and that America is a part as a sub-corporation of the Crown, and that each state is a sub-corporation of the United States Corporation, and like the tree branches that start at the top of the pyramid, and then eventually kind of roll down to the people down the bottom of the pyramid. So I just over time, my realization and I think just my open-mindedness, I wasn't trying to make money. I was just trying to raise awareness to get people to understand that there was something going on outside of what they've been systematically engineered to think. And I think in doing so, it really kind of pushed me into a direction of people and meeting people and having people that I trusted say to me, hey, you should listen to this guy, or you should listen to this guy. In this case, it was a friend, Greg, who worked on Wall Street and was who had a really fine grasp of world finance and all these other things. So, he heard me on Oracle, and there was a bunch of different roundtable discussions and things like that. And then eventually I became more enlightened by them, because they were on the same path. They weren't doing this for any reason, to make money or any of this other stuff. They were just doing it to find like-minded people who wanted to try to make the world a better place, which is I'm sure that what you're trying to do. And long story short, if that's possible with me, and then next thing you know, Greg said, hey, you should listen to this guy, Clint Richardson. He does a show called The Corporation Nation over on RBN. And then I started to listen to Clint, and it was just like, oh, so this is the different layers of the onion when it comes to these conspiratorial programs and people that want to know more, and then you start finding out who's legitimate and who's not. And I've always seen myself to be a legitimate person, and I heard you speak, and even knowing now more about your personal journey with your son, and I'm so sorry that these things happen to you. So again, thanks for being here. All right, so I guess just kind of continue on your path and what brought you.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So what happened was I started writing the first book. I got back in touch with Jason, and he actually gave me an outlet to kind of promote my book, which I never in a million years thought when I first started writing that I would have any kind of outlet at all, because I had been toiling, for years and years in obscurity all by myself with a lot of this stuff. Had nobody to talk to, didn't realize that there were so many other awake and aware people out there. And, like I said, this had consumed the better part of a decade of my life up until that point, where I just toiled alone with this stuff and wrestled with it by myself.
And what was the age? What was your age at the time when the UFO and then
well, let's see. I'll be 44 this month. Okay. So that was back in 2006. So that's, how old was I at that time?
Maybe 30.
Like 31. I was in my early 30s.
See, and I mentioned to a number of people, like when you're young, when you're in your 20s, you can't make, there's something that just goes on with people in their 20s. They can't really make connections. Most of them are not even political. They don't even get involved in the farce that the political system is. And then when they get into their 30s, it's almost as if
a switch clicks on in your head. Yeah.
A switch goes off and you have to make a decision. Now, my decision was, I'm not going to vote for George Bush. I'm going to vote for Al Gore. All right. So that was my kind of, I saw what he was bringing to the table and the kind of the punk elitist that he was, not knowing the backgrounds of all these families and how they go back hundreds and hundreds of years in bloodlines that they're related to the Queen of England and just so many other things. And these things that I learned from Clint's genealogical studies. He did like 3 or 4 programs on genealogy alone. You find out who the roots of Bill Clinton. You find out the roots of so many people. So,
right, and they're all related. And that's the thing people don't realize too. And I was kind of through a similar thing. Yeah. Back at that time too. That's kind of how I first started awakening. Like, I wouldn't say, I had awakened yet or had really gotten, full time into research the way I do, that kind of thing. But that was right after 9/11 happened. I started listening to, of all things, I had tuned into Rush Limbaugh at the time because, when 9/11 actually happened, I was working a job. I was a salesman. I was on the road, and I was listening to the radio. And what I was listening to is, at that time, I don't know if he still has a program or not, Howard Stern had a show on in the morning. Yep. So I was listening to Howard Stern and live when it happened, when the planes crashed into the towers.
Right.
So there was something really going on. I was listening because I just had it on for background noise at the time because I drove a big truck. And, it was one of the only radio stations I could pull in was AM radio at the time. So I was listening to Howard Stern on AM radio, and this had happened. So then I immediately turned over to a local news network, like a radio news network, and I started listening. And after that had happened, for the next several weeks, I started listening just constantly to this news network, and that's I started listening regularly to Rush Limbaugh, who had a very different view of things from what most people do now. But he was one of the early pioneers in this talk radio field.
Exactly.
And so I started listening to him. So I had kind of a right-leaning view at the time of things, and from there, I just started gradually becoming more and more awake and aware of things from that point on. But like I said, I largely attribute the kick into overdrive of my curiosity of these things to actually when my son had that vaccine reaction. That's when I really started going into high gear researching that stuff. So, ever since then, I've been looking down all these different rabbit holes trying to get to the root of the truth. So that's basically what I do. I just look at the truth try and find the truth as best as I could understand it, and try to simplify it and break it down so people could understand what I'm seeing,
Right.
and I could convey the message to them, and they could look and see for themselves. I don't expect anybody to believe anything that I say or write about. What I, advise people to do is go look for yourself. Go research for yourself. I mean, this stuff is obvious on the face of it if you know where the right places to look. All I do is point people in the directions to look.
Okay. And we're talking with Wayne McRoy, author of two books that you can find on Amazon. And so, and the struggle is, and again, with like guys like Rush Limbaugh, when these people are embedded in the system, through some of Clint's research, I remember him saying that Rush Limbaugh is also a extended family member of some of these people as well. So it makes sense. Like, if people are thriving out there, people are in the spotlight. I mean, you could even possibly say that Peter Jennings, my dad used to watch Peter Jennings quite a bit. My dad was a World War II vet, was injured very badly, was not really taken care of. He just slapped a cast on his hip that was shattered, and then the body healed it, and then he was not, it healed it abnormally, and he was never the same way again, physically. And so, he would sit there for years and look at World News Tonight, and he would just shake his head, and I would be like, "Hey, what's going on, Pop?" And he would say, "I fought in World War II for this." He didn't realize what I know today, and he passed away in 2001, like right 2 months right before 9/11. My dad and my mom passed away within a week of each other, and so I never, I guess I would have struggled to be able to tell him, what's really truly going on in the world, and what World War II was, what World War I was, all banker wars, all wars that were planned years in advance. People that they just cannot understand. They cannot see that there's an agenda, and it's and you could say, I mean, really, and I know you'll understand this. This is a supernatural agenda. People, absolutely, it is. People will look at a movie. They will equate everything that anyone talks about. They're like, "Yeah, I saw something like that in a movie, or I saw something like that in a TV show." When the reality is that people have. It's possible that they do not and have never had one unique thought in their head, because of the massive programming from what their parents and their parents' parents have conveyed to them. People that today are profoundly affected by information, history that were lies that were agreed upon, the absolute disaster and tragedy and catastrophe that Dresden and a lot of these innocent German people were just absolutely slaughtered after the fact. Germany had lost the war, and for some reason the Allies thought that they needed to go in there and absolutely crush and kill and destroy, and it's beyond, it's really beyond people's comprehension. So you understand why they can't latch on to that. Plus they're struggling to survive, struggling to make the mortgage payment, struggling to deal with their own children that they have largely deformed and given bad information to. Not like every parent can out there can homeschool their kid and teach them, what truly goes on in the world. But it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy in the I don't even know how to, in the making, and there's more to come.
Right.
And there's more to come. So
Right.
you connected with Jason, and he gave you, an area to, and again, your intention, your pure of heart intention, led you, and I don't think it was an accident. It led you to Jason, and then of course you guys doing podcasts together, and thus the proliferation of your book out into the world, your creation.
Right.
Yes.
Right. I absolutely do not believe in coincidence. And just kind of piggybacking on some of the things you were just saying, an important thing people need to remember is any form of popular media out there is nothing more than propaganda. This is a tool that's designed to keep us divided and thus easier to conquer.
That's right.
It's all about division. They try and divide us into separate camps. That's the thing. Rush Limbaugh, he makes, he herds these people over into this right-wing camp, and everything the left wing does is bad. And, then there's the opposite. The progressives all over the TV and the newspapers and stuff like that. They're all left-wing, and everything the right does is bad. And it just keeps the people infighting over these stupid things that don't really matter. And it's all just a tool to divide people. It's called Hegelian dialectic, and I'm sure you've probably heard that term before. And this, it's a control philosophy. You control both sides of the argument, and then you can steer the conversation in whatever direction you want.
The problem,
and that's what they do.
Solution.
And that's why, problem, reaction, solution. And that's why you'll notice that there's usually an 8-year term of these things now. Like Trump's president, chances are, I'm looking at it, I think he's probably going to be reelected next election. It seems like the likely scenario. So you have a Republican in power for 8 years, and then you'll have a Democrat after that, because that's usually how it goes. And these people are all working for the same team, and that's what people don't realize. It's two wings of the same bird. They're all going the same direction, but it's just a matter of the approach they take to get there. And it's all a manipulation. It's just to manipulate the public consciousness into a direction that they want without them seeming to understand that that's what's going on, because they just keep infighting over nonsensical things at the core of it all.
Right.
And while they're fighting over these nonsensical things, the people at the top of the power structure are steering the agenda they want in the direction they want.
Right.
And sometimes it moves a little slower, and sometimes it moves a little faster, but it's still going the same direction.
Yeah.
So you'll notice right now Trump has kind of shifted gears and turned away from some of the things that he was promising in the beginning. Like he's totally turned a blind eye to the whole vaccination thing.
Right. He was supposed to. Yeah, they were supposed to put together with Robert Kennedy. Was it Robert Kennedy Jr.?
Yep.
A vaccine research, or just to really, really, truly address it, and it never took place. So
right, and that's the whole thing. They want you to believe that these people are in these positions of power and they're representing you. They're not.
Right.
They're representing an elitist group that has a definite agenda in mind, and it's not in the best interest of the public at large. And that's the direction they're going with this stuff.
And every day,
this all once again, every day. You're right.
Every day,
and this
I learned something new. I realized something new. And this goes in contrast to what you're saying. Now, over the weekend, I was around a number of people that were kind of explaining what election night was. Okay. And how things came about, because I was in the camp of there's nothing that's going to beat this Clinton machine. And that kept on sticking in my head. And then speaking to my buddy Greg, he was like, dude, he said, did you see how many people are at Trump's, at his gatherings, and how few people are at Hillary's? And things like that just never even occurred to me. And so that's why it's good to be surrounded by people that can have another, that see things from a different perspective. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, how the heck did this happen? How did Trump win? It makes sense that he would win because his presidency And of course, what we've seen already, the just absolute delusional fucking schizophrenic. I'm sorry, I'm sorry for the language. The delusional schizophrenic, and insanity that has gone on with the left. That 4 more years of this is really just going to tip things into another direction. But there were so many people that I ran into over the weekend, Wayne, that were explaining what was happening and what they believed and what they understood from, on some level, what happened on election night. That it's very possible that Hillary really, really did think that she was going to win, because she's still a pawn in the game.
Right, they all are.
That's the thing. They are bloodline family members. They are cousins, and Trump and Hillary are supposed to be like 18th or 19th cousins. And so when things get to a point where the real control comes from the top, so if it even looks like, that there's, each side is going to implement their electronic subversion of actual voting. And we saw that with there was an HBO documentary. I forget, a woman that pointed it out with these electronic voting machines, how they could take the winner and then electronically flip the votes to the loser in there. And this was a Diebold. This is a Diebold, a major company. Not like super high level, but enough that people have heard it before. Before I heard Diebold on that documentary, I heard, Diebold in general. And so it's possible that she thought that she was going to win, and then they said, no, Trump wins. Because why? Because he's the type of guy. No, and I'm not one of these guys. I hate Trump. I don't like what he's doing for certain countries over other ones, and then saying that this is gonna, this is gonna be good, that's gonna be good, because overall he doesn't really control any of that. And so it's quite possible at this point, and it's becoming crystal clear, because like, how did this happen? How did this happen? And then I do realize that they're all pawns in the game. So they could have made her think that she was going to win, and then at the very last moment, at the top, they pull the strings, and then Trump gets in there. And right. I guess probably one of the biggest things, and he probably had more votes or whatever the case was. And Hillary is highly unlikable. And a lot of people don't even know the history of the Rodham family and how awful, they are. And so, and the history of the Clintons and their Mena, Arkansas, drug links to South America and all these other things. But they all do what they're supposed to do because they were put into that position of power. Bill Clinton didn't come out of nowhere. He is most likely the son of one of the Rockefellers who made time with Bill Clinton's mother, and that's why he's where he is. So, not to get off the subject of that, of what we're talking about today with the 5G rollout, with what is, so, whatever direction you want to take it in from where we left off with your connection to Jason, and then your proliferation, the proliferation of your information out, because of your reconnection to him. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Well, basically, just to kind of work off of what you were just saying, because politics plays an important role in all of this too. It's basically it's theater for the masses. Okay, it's an illusion. We have no say
propaganda
in what goes on. Yeah. We have no say. A president, people have to realize this is just a figurehead. And this goes back to an ancient alchemical concept. This is the concept of the scapegoat. Okay, so this is the guy that you're going to blame for everything going on right now. And we can see that wholeheartedly in society right now. And words have meaning, so you have to realize the elites, they played their Trump card, and that's the reason why Trump is in place right now. Mm-hmm. And I've never seen, more vitriol and division among the American people than there is right now, and that's on purpose. That's by design. That's why he's in power. Yep. He's putting on a heck of a show. He's doing his job perfectly for them. Mm-hmm. So that's why he's in power.
Exactly.
So he's the scapegoat. This is going to be the focus of people's attention. And in the meantime, the people that really make policy and stuff are pushing forward the agenda. And he's just taking, the credit or the blame for it. Exactly. Because that's what the president figurehead job is for. Mm-hmm. So that's what's going on. And once people become more aware of this, you could kind of see how we're being steered. And as you had mentioned, one of the things that they're rolling out now is the whole 5G network implementation. Mm-hmm. So this is going to be a big thing, and this is going to play an important role in things to come. Right now, it's kind of it's slow right at the moment. Like 5G is not being implemented as quickly as what was intended or what has been spoken to be intended.
And there are lawsuits out there with people that do not want it in their communities.
Right. People are very aware that this is harmful to people. In fact, there was recently a school in California that had a 5G tower installed next to it, and like 4 of the kids got cancer or something like that from it. So they removed the tower. Like people petitioned this, and they got it removed. So, I mean, that's a big victory for humanity right there. So people are aware that these things cause harm. And in fact, the technology it's based off of is a military technology. Exactly. It's called an active denial system. And what it does is it's these millimeter waves that the 5G uses, they cause like distress and pain in people. It heats up your skin and makes you feel like you're burning in the area that it's directed at.
Now, is this this is
phone based on a military area?
Just being in the area of something transmitting the 5G millimeter waves.
Right. I mean, that's what it was initially designed as. Right. Now, they may have tweaked it a little bit so it may not cause pain externally, but they could fine-tune it so that it causes pain externally. They can fine-tune it so it only targets your nerve receptors on your skin and causes you discomfort. But what people need to realize is this stuff is cooking us from the inside out. If they put up these 5G towers, that's what's going on. It's harmful. It's been proven to be harmful, and it's been militarized as a weapon, and that's where it came from. So exactly. It's a bad idea. Even people in the telecom industry will tell you this is a bad idea.
So even cell phones in and of themselves are put to your head, put to your body. I have a chiropractor who's a kinesiologist, and that is muscle testing. He does like muscle testing and anything. I mean, I've had like a key fob, one of the key fobs that opens up the car, that you keep in your pocket, and you can just kind of walk up, and if you're in the proximity of the car, you can open the car up, and just holding something like that just messes with your biochemical. You're a biochemical, creation. Okay, not so much evolution, people, but you're a biochemical creation. What we are is something that I weep inside that we will never truly know what we are and where we come from, because this is another thing that's been done to us.
Absolutely.
And so, when we touch these things, when we touch phones and everything like that, it weakens the energy field of our bodies. And so, we've had the 2G, we've had the 3G, which is, kind of the same thing, but nowhere near this 5th generation that you've researched and written so much about, as well as quantum computers, and I want to get into that as well. the 4G, and I don't put them next to my head. Throughout the years, you talk to people, and you think to yourself, like, what is it? This one woman who was a real estate agent, she died of like a brain aneurysm, and these real estate agents are on the phone all the time, talking on the phone all the time, because money is not my God, but money is the world's God. And so this technology, just like we've heard David Icke speak about in the past, this totalitarian tiptoe. They move things in a specific direction. They move technology in a specific direction, and we're getting to the monster of it, like, if you will, like the the Godzilla, or the really, really bad version of this is coming, and there's a reason for it.
Right. And what you need to understand is these things, the way they implement them, they do it in small little incremental steps at a time, so people don't notice. And this is a concept called the Overton window. What this does is, this is a concept where they could shift the public consciousness into what's socially acceptable in small little increments at a time by introducing more and more bizarre ideas slowly, in order to make one thing seem outrageous, to shift the Overton window to something to make it more acceptable towards where they're going with this. Like, one of the examples that I'll use is this whole transgender agenda going on right now. It started slowly. First, they started to try to make homosexuality and gay marriage and stuff a normal thing. So they used this shift in the Overton window to make that pretty normal now, right? So, I mean, that doesn't even seem like a social issue at this point in this day and age in society. And now they're pushing this towards the whole transgender thing.
Right.
And this all leads to a subcategory of transhumanism, which is called postgenderism. And this is an actual thing going on. And this ties directly into the transhumanist singularity and transhumanist movement. It's called postgenderism. And what this is this is a philosophy and a plan to end gender. Right. It's designed to eliminate gender. You can be whatever you want to be, and this has direct ties to transhumanism. And you see the word postgender, you can think of this as being synonymous with transhuman.
Right.
So that's where this is leading, and that's what this shift of the Overton window is all about. First, they started with homosexuality. Right. Let's make that normal by introducing transgender. So that's the thing that's on people's mind right now, transgender. Well, this is weird. This is not socially acceptable. This is, that kind of thing. But, being gay is not a big deal. And that's kind of how they've shifted the social norm right now. Right. And they're trying to normalize this transgenderism right now. So once this has become pretty much socially acceptable, which we're getting to that tipping point right now, where it'll be considered socially acceptable, the next step is postgenderism, and the next step after that's transhumanism, because they're both pretty much the same thing.
And these groups, because they've been, the left will support, the right will attack. Because that's part of their DNA.
Part of the playbook.
Part of the playbook, the blueprint. So these people, because they're what they are or what they believe that they are, they will allow themselves to be weaponized. They will allow themselves to be weaponized and be an even more lucrative pawn in the game to the control structure that wants to divide and conquer, and they seek not only just the racial divide and conquer, but which was when they created the KKK, And I've heard that the Democratic Party created the KKK, and I've heard that Albert Pike was the creator of the KKK, and then the top, lead Freemason in the world. And in like 1850, he apparently wrote a letter or a book or some kind of written information about how there was going to be 3 world wars. So people constantly go back to this, and that's like one more piece that says that the world is already predetermined, so that the world can be steered, socially engineered into a specific area. So divide and conquer with the races, divide and conquer with men and women.
Right, they use any kind of divide that they can to split
Hollywood,
people up and separate them.
Sodom in Hollywood. There's a guy out there now who's pretty controversial. Wrote a book about it's called Libido Dominandi, sexual revolution for political control, sexual things like that. So in there, kind of points out that the sexual revolution and all these other things are used you use people's passions to then be able to get them and to be able to control them, politically, and then again turn them into like a weaponized pawn piece. And so that's what's happening with the agenda of the post-gender agenda. Is going to be chock-filled, loaded with divide and conquer strategies, and you'll see it up front.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely, you'll see it. We see it going on right now as we speak. Mm-hmm. And like I was alluding to, this is a concept called the Overton window. This is one of the biggest and most important social control tools that the elite use right now. And this is how they incrementally shift things to what society accepts as being normal. And this is how they condition you into accepting these things they're putting forward.
Right.
And along with this, they also use, all forms of media as an outlet for this kind of thing. They introduce it first in the entertainment, like a lot of these ideas that they want to push. So you'll see a lot of stuff in movies and all that looks like, that we would consider science fiction right now. But I guarantee you there's an agenda at play. And a lot of what we view as science fiction is science fact right now because, the Black Projects community and all these special access programs and stuff that are going on right now behind the scenes that are mostly in control by corporations, by the way. The military and the government have very little say in a lot of this stuff because what they do is they subcontract out to these military subcontractors, these companies, these corporations, to do a lot of these projects. So what goes on in these projects are not subject to any kind of disclosure to government, or it's also not available from Freedom of Information Act requests. So that way, these corporations are in control of these technologies and stuff, developing these technologies. And the public can't find out what's going on because they claim it's proprietary and it's not, subject to FOIA. So you can't find out what they're even working on. And that's how they keep a lot of these programs secret. But I guarantee you, in the Black Projects community, they're at least 30 to 50 years ahead in technology of what we see as the state of the art today in the public view. So that's kind of what's going on, and that's why they're kind of rolling these things out. So if you see technology come forward right now, or it's being pushed or talked about right now,
it's already been.
I guarantee you it's already been put through its paces by the military-industrial complex, and they figured out every application that they can for use for it before you see it in the public sector. So when you consider the cell phone in your pocket is probably 1970s or 1960s technology, think about that. That's how far beyond what we see that some of these programs and projects are working on.
Wow. So with regard to the esoteric agendas, like the fulfilling ancient agendas. Now, again, people would really have a really hard time understanding, because I've heard when I've talked to people about 9/11, and for anybody out there who other than the loss of life, which was real, we were lied to about everything else. So people can't imagine that government would have, that will say the government will have that they're not that coordinated. Now, maybe they're thinking about the Senate and Congress. They don't realize, like deep state and some of these other that have nothing but time and money that are put into researching things. Like case in point, back in the day, I want to say it was Time Magazine, and there was a picture of a needle, and then there was like a liquid drop that was coming out of it. Representing some kind of inoculation, but the title of it was called interferon. And what was done to kind of add a little bit of medical agenda, esoteric agenda. What was done was when they did research, when they started really trying to do research about our immune system. What they did was, and one of the experiments was injecting a rabbit with some kind of pathogen, and then right away, as you would imagine, as they imagine what would start to happen, was that rabbit would start to get sick, and it would start exhibiting levels of physical sickness, chemical, biological sickness. And then eventually, and as they researched what was going on at the cellular level, they realized that they really kind of started looking at the immune system and saying, what got this rabbit better? Because it eventually got better. They were like, we injected this thing with some pretty nasty stuff, but it rebounded and now it's good, right? And they're like, what is this? And what you're doing here now is, if you go any further with this, you're messing with creation. You're messing with God. But these people that do this stuff, that fund this stuff, they're anti-God. And the people that are doing the research, they may not even know what they're part of. See, that's the thing. That's the compartmentalization that I think goes on with what I'm kind of talking about here, and what you're talking about. There's people that do the research on these things, but they might not even know what they're doing. They're just part of I need a job, I'm a scientist, I'm this, I'm that. But what they did was they found that this process that took place inside the rabbit, and they called it, and they got down to it, when they got down to a common denominator, they said they called it interferon. And I think what they did after they realized what this was, this miracle that took place that saved this rabbit from what they inflicted upon it, they started to figure out and look at the numbers and look at what transactions took place, and they were proteins. There were proteins that in the immune system that would surround the cell, that would surround these areas that were being affected by the pathogen that they injected in there. And then what they did was, how do we interfere with that? How do we interfere with this? Which I believe on some level was like the next stage of, how do we create disease? How do we create, because I really truly believe without this interference, without the interference of technology and this and everything that we've been exposed to, household cleaners, asbestos, you name it. We live in a weaponized society, and it's not an accident. And early on, when I started talking about like things with people, even before I was really, really aware, one one, two, or if not all the people that I would have conversations with. They'd be like, I'm gonna, you're gonna die of something. You're gonna die of something. Something's gonna give you cancer. Something's gonna do this. So there's the programming that they get into people that you can just get. One day you get cancer and there's no rhyme or reason and blah 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 blah. So they get people thinking in those terms, and then of course we were fooled and deceived by genetics, and I do believe that genetics have a part in what happens to us. And then we started hearing about epigenetics and how. And basically, and I think I can sum it up in one thing, genes dictate what roads you can take, what things that can possibly happen to you. But here's the thing. If you are not attacked with vaccines, attacked with pharmaceutical meds, attacked with a lot of these weaponized things in our society, your body can really recover from it can really even recover from a lot of these nasty things that are done to it, because it's got that ability to do it, because I believe we are creation. I believe that there is a creator, and one thing that we've been indoctrinated with Darwinism and everything. And this goes, the Darwin and all these guys were all on the payroll, whether they knew it or not, of this crown corporation, and their absolute disdain for people, whether they thought, even one of the princes over there, I want to say it was maybe the Queen's husband, said that if he ever died, he would want to be reincarnated as a virus, as to correct or solve the overpopulation.
Right.
Issue.
That was Prince Charles that said that.
Even back then, they have a disdain for these people. And to this day, you will still see people in the street fawning over this royal family and a royal wedding. But then Trump comes to town, and I'm not in any way, saying, Trump is a good guy or anything, but I'm just not going to have this delusion or freak out about his existence as a president. Why did they freak out when Donald Trump showed up? Why weren't they freaking out about the Queen and all this and just their absolute, and David Icke pointed out every time they talk about racism and all this stuff and this Islamophobia and the stuff that are going on over in the UK. The royal family is an elitist. They're living parasitically off you, and that's the thing about this whole crown corporation. They've succeeded in putting all of their people into all of the most powerful areas of the world, and that's why we are subjects. We are subjugated by them, but they've done an incredible job of making us think that we're free and that we can do anything and that we can even be president. There's a really good one. If we work hard enough and all this other stuff. But they forget to tell you that you have to have Rh negative blood and all these other fine, characteristics.
Right. And that's all part and parcel of what goes on. It's a very small group of people at the top of it all that controls all this stuff and steers all this stuff. Mm-hmm. To speak of, sure. To what you were just speaking about, though, with the human immune system and stuff, this is something that has been hijacked and taken control of. And I demonstrate that in my newest book, The Autism Epidemic, Transhumanism's Dirty Little Secret.
Right.
I talk about...
You're speaking of calcium channels and things like that?
What's that?
You mentioned something about calcium channel or something that. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was like super. And as soon as you said that, I was like, there you go. This is like... what you're saying is interesting. This is like critical. This is like critical. So
this is what people need to wrap their heads around is this stuff has been going on and been heavily researched. And a lot of this ties back to something called the Cybernetics Group, which was formed initially. They came together in 1942, but didn't actually form officially until 1946, after the end of World War II. This was all promulgated and funded by the Macy Foundation along with the Rockefeller Foundation. They put together this Cybernetics Group, which brought together experts from various different fields, and they worked on a lot of different things together. And one of the things that came out of this was, artificial intelligence. This is where artificial intelligence was born. The whole idea was with this Cybernetics Group. And one thing that goes hand in hand with that is, believe it or not, the autism epidemic. And people may be completely ignorant of this whole thing, and that's not a surprise, because I think it's been cleverly hidden. When you go back and actually look at the research done by the Cybernetics Group, you could see through time the chain of connections that helped to bring about this epidemic. And we could go ahead and discuss that in a little more detail here.
Sure.
It starts with an idea that the cyberneticists seized upon by a gentleman named Walter Cannon. He wrote a paper in 1929 where he spoke of homeostasis. And this is where a lot of this stuff really comes to the forefront with this, is they looked at his homeostasis work and decided that the human body and the human mind are homeostatic models. So with these being homeostatic systems, what they wanted to do is figure out, how can we disrupt and control these systems? Okay, because what cybernetics is, let's define cybernetics to try and make it a little easier for people to understand what we're talking about. Because most people hear cybernetics and they think of robotics and things like that, which is a part of what goes on with it. But what cybernetics really is this is an approach of holistic system studies. They study whole systems as opposed to different individual parts of systems, like we're accustomed to. Like in school, we're taught in small subjects. Our subjects are all broken down into individual subjects. Like we have science class, math class, English class, and they're short little segments, like 40-minute classes that never really cross over or touch one another. So it breaks apart whole ideas into these individual ideas and keeps us confused. And that's by design. Whereas cybernetics, the approach cybernetics takes this is a wholly opposite direction. They look at whole systems and figure out methods to control these systems. And that's what cybernetics is all about. It's about systems control. And that's what the science of cybernetics is. So they brought together all these people from these different fields of study, computers and biology, paleontology, anthropology, all sorts of different fields, psychology. They brought these people together to try to figure out, how can we control the biological system? How could we control, well, first of all, how could we quantify and control consciousness? That was one of the primary things they were looking at. And, to quantify and control the mind. And this is where the whole field of artificial intelligence comes from, too. They were looking at this. So they approached this from the homeostatic model put forth by Walter Cannon. They figured the body and the nervous system and the mind, these were all homeostatic systems. And a homeostasis, what this is a system will strive to maintain a certain internal balance. So when you look at things from this perspective, the human body is a homeostatic system. It tries to maintain a certain internal balance. So they tried to figure out, well, what would happen if we were to disrupt this balance in the homeostatic system? What would it look like? And what would we see? So early on, within this cybernetics group, there was a gentleman named Gregory Bateson who started something called the Bateson Project. And this was a study of what they termed schizophrenic people. because he was trying to find what causes schizophrenia. So he was looking at schizophrenic people, and what you need to keep in mind at this time in history, the whole idea of autism as a separate diagnosis hasn't really latched on yet, even though Leo Kanner put forth the work in 1943, which named it as an individual condition. But most people in the field didn't really understand that yet or have it categorized yet as autism. It was subcategorized under schizophrenia. So he was studying schizophrenic patients and children that they termed as being pre-schizophrenic, which actually these are the symptoms of autism. These would be now categorized as autism. So they were studying these people to try and figure out what's going on. Like, why are these people having these different symptoms? So Bateson's first approach was to look at this from more of a behavioral aspect. So he tried to equate this to people being mistreated by their parents and their family and stuff like that. Right. And he came up with several good theories about that. But at the end of the day, none of those theories ever panned out, and they figured out that there had to be some kind of a physiological factor involved. So from there, later cyberneticists went ahead and started studying the physiology end of it and figured out that what's causing a lot of these conditions in people is a disruption of the neuronal calcium channels. So from there, they were able to duplicate some of these symptoms in lab studies. Right. And I would speculate that they found ways to actually try and reverse these. Right. I can't find anything in the literature about that, but I mean, definitely they studied this stuff heavily. And what they had figured out, and this is an important aspect here, is they figured out how to disrupt people's systems this way. And by doing this, they figured out what they could do. And this is all relates to cybernetics science. What they could do is they could create what they call a causal circuit. And in creating this causal circuit, it creates a feedback loop in the system, and they can take control of the system that way. And they do this with everything. I mean, this is not just exclusive biology or physiology or anything like that. This is any type of a system you can imagine. This is what cybernetics does. It uses a causal circuit to create a feedback loop in order to control the system. They do this with economics. They do this with everything. So, like a lot of these people that are in control right now, they're very well versed in the cybernetics applications of things. So this is what they do. They hijack the system by introducing a substance or an idea to the system that creates this causal circuit and creates the feedback loop that they can control.
Kind of like a problem, reaction, solution type thing.
If you pretty much, yeah.
Okay. So is it now, considering the time, is it possible that they created an issue? Because what we see in the world today is they create an issue. They know that they've created it, or at least a small portion of society creates it. And then what they do is they create markets to combat something that was created that never would have existed if it wasn't for this hijacking that took place.
Right. That's exactly what's going on. They've created this problem. They've created this autism epidemic. This is my theory now. Mm-hmm. They created this autism epidemic. It may have came about accidentally at first, but they figured out how to engineer it. And what my study and stuff, my research has led to the conclusion for me that this looks to me like it's an engineered epidemic. You can see, if you look at the numbers, the cases of autism now, the people on the higher functioning end mm-hmm. has increased drastically, where the people on the lower functioning end of autism has decreased. So that suggests to me they're steering it in a specific direction. And there's a whole social engineering campaign that goes along with this to normalize autism and to make it acceptable and to portray people on the autism spectrum as eccentric geniuses. And that's what they're looking for. They're engineering this condition in people, and the reason they're doing it is all part of the solution that they're going to eventually present for it, which is going to be some kind of a cybernetic or computer brain interface implant, which is going to reverse some of the symptoms. And I won't be surprised if it rolls out within the next year or so, where they start saying, hey, we have this new brain implant that could help treat autism symptoms. That's how they're going to start this. And this is where the transhuman end of it ties in.
And
they're using people on the autism spectrum as guinea pigs to test out new drugs and new technologies. That's what's going on.
Something that eliminates the feedback loop.
Right, it helps to re-regulate the feedback loop. But the reason, once again, this all ties back to that cybernetics group again, because what people don't realize is many of the artificial intelligence studies and stuff they're doing, and these machines they're building with artificial intelligence, this relates to a model of intelligence that autism is based off of. So they see people on the autism spectrum as being more compatible with the machines.
And controlled.
Because,
thusly.
Right, the artificial intelligence, they can't get it to be quite human level intelligence. So what they're trying to do is they're dysregulating the intelligence feedback loops in people to make it more compatible to merge with machines. So they're kind of bringing down the human consciousness down to the machine level so that they can merge it, rather than bringing the machine level up to the human consciousness level. That's exactly what's going on, and they're engineering this to try and get it done quicker, because they're kind of behind the eight ball right now. They know people are waking up left and right to their plans and stuff. So they're in panic mode. That's why they're pushing this stuff so heavy. And this is part and parcel why the whole vaccine agenda has taken off as it has.
Because they need more.
Right. They want to get this rolling a lot faster than what they had originally intended, because people are waking up to this. And, they're starting to lose control. And they don't want to lose control.
And anybody that's listening out there, when you say, or you're thinking that this is unbelievable, there's no way that they would do this to people, or there's no way that someone would do this. No, you wouldn't do this to someone. The people that are doing it may not even understand that they're doing it. And that's the thing about the compartmentalization. Is like, I believe that there is a certain percentage of people that are just like, oh, we're going to work on this. And right, like you just said, something that can be created that's going to help people with autism. Who wouldn't want to? Who wouldn't want to be involved in that? Now, they knew what the ultimate outcome would be, then maybe they would have some kind of moral, objection to it. But who wouldn't want to be involved in something that would be? And that's how most of what the damage and the chaos and the things that they do, they kind of, just kind of wrap it in this. It's for the children. It's for this. It's for that, and it's always used as some kind of benevolent thing. That how could you be against this? It's for children, or how could you be against this? So they really, really are masters, absolute masters at being able to create. What do they call it? Consent, to manufacture.
It's a manipulated consent. Absolutely.
And what I would say and what you say is, I do not consent to this, and then they would say, well, you must hate children then.
Oh, right. That's the whole thing. They try and catch you in this. It's a whole social engineering thing going on with it. They try to make it. Oh, well, you don't want to help children. Exactly. You're a terrible human being. And that's kind of how they get this stuff rolling and get the funding for it and get people behind it.
But I got
is because it does has the potential to. It does have potential to do something good. But the problem is the people controlling it do not have good intentions with it, and that's what we need to be aware of.
And you could, out of some, some absolute aberration of reality, Wayne McRoy gets invited to, Congress to talk about something like this, and you'd be like, "I've written books about this. I've done so much research on this. There is something to this," and they'd be like, "Conspiracy theorist." You have one more minute to make your your claim or whatever, and that's what is that's what's done in society. Just like I'll give you an example, a real brief example, and I had to give kudos to this guy because in the past he's part of the system. Jon Stewart, which is not his real name, but Jon Stewart of The Daily Show is on Capitol Hill. He's sitting there with first responders from 9/11 that we should never forget. We should never forget these people. We should never forget this day. And 99% of these people have not gotten the care that they need. One guy had absolute was going to go through his 67th chemotherapy or something for things that lungs the debilitated lung from things that were in the blast from the controlled demolition that some say took place that day. And he's there fighting and almost in tears saying, how come there's only 20% of the people here that should be here to see this? And it's just have you not figured it out? They don't care about you. They don't care. They are parasites. There's different levels of parasitism. The Crown Corporation is the main parasite. And then their family members and their extended family members like John McCain and all these other people that get into and never get ejected from politics. Poly, if you look it up in Latin, poly, many, ticks, bloodsuckers. They're parasites. They don't want to help the first responders. They injected, I think there was a book called Vaccine A or something by somebody named Matsumoto, who wrote about inoculations that were given during the Gulf War. People were coming back and they were like, I'm sick. And then they were like, oh, it's just post-traumatic stress. And the thing is that there are forces behind not researching this. There are forces behind not giving the funds and not doing the things to find out, because if there was the ability to do the research to find out what was going on, it would unlock things that they would not. And that's the only thing that I can really think is that they would unlock things that they would not want people to expose about. Why are these people sick? Why did all these people get cancer? And just riddled with disease. And then another thing that Jon Stewart said in an off interview said, once we deal with this, then we're going to deal with the burn pits. Now, a lot of people don't know what the burn pits are, but are you familiar with what they are?
No, I haven't heard that expression before. Go ahead and explain it.
There was an author that written a book, and it was about burn pits over in the Middle East and Iraq in the war spectrum over there. And what they did was it was just waste, chemical waste, everything that you would imagine that would be accumulated and that would just be as a part of the war that has been going on over there, this unnecessary war, this farce. And what they do is they set it on fire. They're burning them up, and it's chemicals, and it's all of these other noxious things. And these people there was a documentary on RT about it. This one guy, you saw a picture of him. He was, a duped soldier to fight for the corporations, looked like a healthy young man. He's home now, and he's probably dead now. He's you see him there, and then you see him laying on a hospital bed, and he had head and neck, some kind of head and neck cancer, and he's he's not healthy. Let's just say he's not healthy anymore. He looks like he looks like he's dying, and he is dying, and he's probably not alive anymore, like so many other people, because they're breathing in these chemicals over there. They don't care what they expose you to, and that includes the experimentation of the vaccines on the troops.
Absolutely. Okay, I know what you're talking about now. I had never heard it referred to that way, though.
Yeah.
But nothing will ever come to the light of day with that.
Yeah.
Nothing in the mainstream, anyway.
That's right.
And that's part and parcel of what goes on. You might get a celebrity or something here and there that might come out about an issue and speak about it, but it'll never come to fruition. That's the thing. I mean, none of this stuff will ever get exposed mainstream unless something big really happens here.
Yeah.
If the masses wake up in mass and demand something happen from this and demand the information.
The reason I bring that up is because it's yet another example of how we're lied to, and we're poisoned, and we're subjugated, and we're used, and then there's why is the Veterans Administration and all these people, they're not getting what they want and the help that they need at home? Because they're not going to create a killer. They're not going to create someone, a murderer, that's going to go over there and that doesn't know that they're fighting for a corporation, doesn't know that all of this is completely unnecessary. They're not going to help those people. They're not going to empower and make a weapon that they create. They're not going to weaponize a weapon that they created. I guess I could put it in those terms.
Right. They have no intention of losing control of that thing that they created. And that's what it's all about. If they could keep you, sick and distracted and poor and just struggling day to day to get by, they control you. I mean, that's what it all comes down to. It's all about control, and these people are about control. So if they could do anything to kind of disrupt your life and make you, your conditions less than optimal for you to do the things that your naturally God-given rights to do are, and your drive to do, they can keep you under their control. They can keep you under their thumb. And that's what a lot of this is about. Yeah. If you're sickened and, and complacent, that's right where they want you. Right. They want you to be sick and complacent. And they have a control system in place just for this. And this is all promulgated through media. It's promulgated through, the things they're spraying us with in the sky and the now admitted to geoengineering programs, which they've denied for decades but have been going on, I can assure you. And that's all part of this too.
But it's
they're poisoning your food, your water. They're injecting you with lethal substances. Mm-hmm. So
and it's all done. Again, when it does make its debut on a 60 Minutes program or something like that, it'll be like, well, they had to do something to mitigate, climate change and all these other things. So it's always something like they create a problem. There's so many people.
And then they roll out something that's supposedly the solution for the problem. And, this is all by design. These people use long-term planning. Exactly. And that's what people need to get their heads around, too. They use 50 and 100-year plans and even longer than that to implement these things slowly over time and slowly erode away people's rights and thoughts and moral values. They do this stuff on purpose, and there's a design to it. There's an agenda behind it, and this is where they're going with it. And right now, one of the biggest things going on in our society that I see as the problem is this whole, trying to mandate vaccines kind of thing in our country right now, because this is the end game. If we do not oppose this is an invasive medical procedure they're forcing upon you against your will. If we don't oppose this, they're going to roll right over us. But there is hope. If we stand up, if we could stop this vaccine agenda, if we could end the autism epidemic, then their whole house of cards falls, and they can't pull off their whole transhumanist plan and the agenda that's in place with this, because this is what this is all leading to, whether people realize it or not. Now, to understand this a little better, you could read my books. to get a better view of what's going on with this, because there's different nanotechnologies and stuff involved in all this too, and that's being injected in you too that people aren't aware of.
Yeah. And so, this is a big joke. Like this is like when I've spoken about this to people. Like I'll just bring up any number of different things about the world does not run and work the way you think that it does. They make you believe things that are not true, and it happens over a number of years. They societally engineer you so that they don't have to police you so much as your neighbor policing you or your friend saying, "Hey, you probably don't want to go there," Or
right, self-censor.
Or the example of someone online. I won't mention his name because somebody out there might hear it and then not fully understand the message. But if somebody, I'll give you an example. Somebody tweets out, somebody who is people that they know, and they say, "I think my son is he's 4, but I think he's a transsexual. I think he's a transsexual because of his behavior or whatever. I think I'm going to start giving him hormone blockers." And then somebody out there that sees this that would be like, "All right, whatever your son is going to be, don't inflict." And so the guy might say something like, "That's child abuse. Why would you give a 4-year-old kid who's not even fully developed in many different ways, hormone blockers?" And then because we live in such a sick, demented society, that person would be ostracized and lose anything that he or she had for saying something like that. And that's one example of how far that we've kind of fallen from what's right and what's wrong. And it's
right, and that's all by design.
And it's all
that's the whole thing. It's all by design,
right?
Because they want these more and more, perverted ideas, and that's what it is. This is a perversion of the natural order. That's their whole end game, is inversion of the entire natural order. They can't control nature. So what they intend to do is build an entire artificial system that they can control. And that's what this is all about. It's a total inversion of nature, and it's a total inversion of natural sciences and what I term alchemical sciences. And, this is an overturning of God's creation and turning it into something completely artificial.
Right.
And that's largely the angle I come from with a lot of my research. This is what they're planning on doing and what they're actively working to implement. So when you're aware of this and you see it coming and you see it being slowly implemented day in and day out, you just want to go scream it from the rooftops. But people, because of their cognitive dissonance and, their many, many years of being socially programmed and stuff, they just can't see it yet. Right. But something usually happens where people start to snap out of it and see. And this is happening on a larger scale now. People are snapping out of the programming and out of the trance, and they're seeing what's going on. The world definitely works differently than what we're told.
And they're banning people that are just saying to parents, whether on Facebook or on the intelligence agencies, the alphabet agencies creations, Google, Facebook, Twitter. They're banning people that are just saying, "Hey, listen, do some research before." Look at this woman over here. Here's an example of this woman and this woman, and they're all part of a group whose children were after they got the MMR vaccine or the one that your son got. They were not the same. They were not the same ever again. They don't want this. They don't want to see that. But one thing that I have seen quite a bit of is that people that are telling the truth about different things as long as it fits in a narrative that somebody can point at and say, look at what this guy's saying here. He hates this group of people. He hates this group of people. He hates that group of people over there. As long as they're on there and they can be using these examples to someone who doesn't understand or doesn't know the divide and conquer and the social engineering, those people that still have their channel that you would think that would have been, and I don't think anybody's channel should ever be removed for like whatever reason. If somebody's going to say something outrageous or do something outrageous, you can always use that as an example. And then, of course, if law enforcement has to get involved into it, then law enforcement gets involved in it. But nobody's platform should ever be removed if they're not calling for harm to other people. Unfortunately, with the whole thing, they'll say, like, you give me an example. A guy says, listen, I don't get my kids vaccinated, but if your kid over there gets vaccinated for, hepatitis and all these things and that the kid would most likely never get at his age, your child is safe from my child. And then what they did once they saw that was a thing, that was a platform that people were standing on that made sense, then they said, herd immunity. We got to get the herd immunity up. Well, they're basically telling you what they think of you when they say herd immunity. You're right. They animals.
They think of you as cattle.
We are animals to them. We are animals, and and that's it. When you look at again the what was it? Was it Prince? Prince was it not Charles, the young so-called father of William and the other one, but the Queen's husband, saying that he would like to come back as a virus to solve the world's overpopulation problem, meaning you and your family let the light shine on you, and everything that you've ever done and everything that you will do is just a blessing to the world, but everybody else needs to be culled. Everybody else needs to die because and that's the way the royals think. But unfortunately, I think it kind of goes across the board. So we've been talking with Wayne McRoy. His latest book is The Autism Epidemic, Transhumanism's Dirty Little Secret. You can find that on Amazon. His book prior to that was The Alchemical Tech Revolution, Fulfilling Ancient Esoteric Agendas Through the Use of High Technology. So we've got about a minute and a half left before I have to end the recording, but I want to talk to you for maybe about 5 minutes after we end the recording. But just tell people how they can contact you and see what you're up to, what's on your radar.
Okay. People could check out my Facebook page. That's primarily where I do most of my posting and stuff, and that's called Files from the Conspiratorium. I could also be reached at alchemicaltechrevolution@gmail.com, and I have kind of a limited reach on YouTube at Alchemicals Tech Revolution. Like I said, I really haven't published much of anything there lately because, honestly, I just see it as being a dying platform because of all the censorship nonsense they've been pulling as of late. So I've really kind of pulled back from, posting much of anything there. So if people want to check me out at those channels, they can. And like I said, if they want to contact me directly, it's
There is only one holistic system of systems. I will MK Ultra ya, put the MK scope on ya. If the MK hits you, it's guaranteed to open ya. The 57mm Mark 110, 220 rounds a minute. try to stop them? Don't put that on your wish list, that's retarded babble. Protesters make the hit list soon as they start to rabble. They are nothing but fishes in the barrel. It doesn't have to be Christmas for a carol. Some decorate with ornamental decorum. Some perform Shakana on Hanukkah and Purim. That's where my job come in. I am a blessing to the mercenary for the corporation selling weapons to them. Any potential competitor step into them. I'm authorized to knock them out and stick a GPS into them. They want to sell uranium to Iran. That's enriched, that's a bitch. Now we gotta teach a lesson.
The Anti-Media Radio with Levon. Make sure you check out ucy.tv.
Social slime, they don't matter, genocide, sick from water, sick from